It's 7 p.m. Friday, August 23rd, here in Seoul.
And these are the top stories at this hour. The Blue House says its decision to end its military intel sharing pact with Japan, called GSOMIA, won't hurt the South Korea-U.S. alliance, but rather strengthen it. It also points the finger at Japan for driving South Korea to end the pact by flatly ignoring Korea's continued calls for talks.
Washington expresses disappointment over Seoul's decision to terminate GSOMIA, urging Korea and Japan to continue dialogue. Tokyo says the decision has made it harder for both sides to work together.
Korea's finance chief says GSOMIA's termination has added economic uncertainties stemming from Japan's trade restrictions, but he lays out plans to mitigate the impact. This while next year's budget was set at around $422 billion, a 9% increase from this year.
And the political tension between Seoul and Tokyo doesn't seem to bother the Japanese people, as the number of Japanese tourists to Korea actually increases. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Arirang News Center. Live from Seoul, I'm Han-daeun.
And I'm Noah-Dam. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. Our top story tonight, we start at the South Korean presidential office. The Blue House claims its decision to terminate a military intelligence sharing pact with Japan known as GSOMIA could end up being an opportunity to strengthen the alliance between South Korea and the U.S.
Washington has expressed disappointment over the decision, but Seoul says it'll continue to work with the U.S. to strengthen their ties, as such reaction is only natural. Our Park Hee-jun has our top story.
The Blue House believes its decision to pull out from its military intel sharing agreement with Japan will not hurt the South Korea-U.S. alliance, but rather upgrade it.
The government has frequently interacted with the U.S. while reviewing the South Korea-Japan dispute and the GSOMIA issue, and we coordinated especially closely between our national security councils. We will work to make sure this decision does not weaken the alliance with the U.S., but rather upgrades it to another level of more robust relations.
South Korea's decision to walk away from GSOMIA has seen a backlash from not only Japan, but also the U.S., which expressed disappointment over the decision, which it says undermines trilateral cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jong told reporters Friday that it's natural for Washington to be disappointed since it wanted Korea to extend the deal. But Korea will continue to make its case, and according to Kim, this will result in a more robust alliance. And if necessary, President Moon Jae-in and U.S. President Donald Trump could talk on the phone. Addressing security concerns, Kim says South Korea will actively make use of another deal similar to GSOMIA in some respects to fill the gap. That's the Trilateral Information Sharing Agreement, or TISA, a trilateral pact between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan established in 2014, enabling the exchange of classified information regarding North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. A key difference is that information would have to flow through the U.S., meaning it will not be real-time. This, he says, along with an increased military defense budget, will help maintain the country's national security and military readiness. And as South Korea enhances its independent ability to gather intelligence, its allies should depend on it more. And Kim criticized Japan again for not responding to South Korea's diplomatic gestures. Because there was no change in Japan's attitude, he said the government had no choice but to leave the agreement. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now that GSOMIA is scrapped, South Korea plans to utilize the Seoul-Washington-Tokyo Trilateral Information Sharing Pact, or TISA, to effectively counter North Korea threats that still exist. Our Oh Jung-hee now takes a deeper look at what the arrangement is.
The South Korean military says even without a bilateral pact, classified information can still be shared between Seoul and Tokyo through Washington. On Friday, Seoul's Defense Ministry told reporters that it'll continue and strengthen the sharing of military information among the three through TISA, or the Trilateral Information Sharing Arrangement. TISA was signed back in 2014, a year after the North carried out its third nuclear test. The three countries felt the need to exchange intelligence in light of the North's growing nuclear and missile threats. TISA enables Seoul and Tokyo to share information with each other via the U.S. South Korea and Japan send the U.S. information, which the U.S. then evaluates and sends to the other side. The information can take oral, visual, or written form. Concerns are that it could take longer for South Korea and Japan to exchange intel, and it could reduce the quality of the information compared to GSOMIA. But the level of information shared through TISA differs case by case. It could be level 2 or 3, but sometimes level 1. And Seoul says the three countries will be working to share worthwhile information upon sufficient consideration. GSOMIA will remain in effect for 90 more days. Until November 22nd, South Korea's military says it'll be sharing information directly with Japan as necessary. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
The United States is disappointed, according to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, over South Korea's decision to quit the intel sharing pact with Japan. Both countries are Washington's important Asian allies, and having the two on the same page has been deemed important to the U.S. for the regional security. Our Kan Young-woo has late details.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he's disappointed with Seoul's decision after South Korea announced it was withdrawing from its military intelligence sharing pact with Japan, known as the General Security of Military Information Agreement, or GSOMIA.
We're disappointed to see the decision that the South Koreans made about that information sharing agreement. We were urging each of the two countries to continue to engage, to continue to have dialogue.
At a joint press conference with his Canadian counterpart in Ottawa on Thursday, Pompeo said there's no doubt the shared interests of South Korea and Japan are important to the U.S. Pompeo said he hopes the two countries can begin to put their relationship back in exactly the right place. The Pentagon also voiced its worries. According to Seoul's Defense Ministry, Minister Chung Kyung-do held phone talks with his U.S. counterpart Mark Esper on Friday morning. Chung explained the reasons behind South Korea's decision, like Tokyo's insincere responses to Seoul's efforts to mend ties through dialogue. Esper expressed his concern and stressed the importance of the continued security cooperation among the three countries. Pentagon spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel David Eastburn said the Pentagon expresses strong concern and disappointment that the Moon administration has withheld its renewal of the military intelligence sharing agreement with Tokyo. Eastburn also said the U.S. believes the integrity of the three countries' mutual defense and security ties must persist despite frictions in other areas of the South Korea-Japan relationship. He added the U.S. will continue to pursue bilateral and trilateral defense and security cooperation with the two nations. On Thursday, South Korea's top office announced its decision to withdraw from the intel sharing pact with Japan. Seoul's decision means the agreement will end in November. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
A day after South Korea's decision to withdraw from GSOMIA, the Japanese Prime Minister and other top Japanese government officials weighed in, expressing regret over Seoul's move. Our Kim Hae-sung has their words.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has criticized South Korea's decision to withdraw from GSOMIA, saying the action damages trust with Tokyo. Abe told reporters Friday that Seoul's decision would make it harder for the two countries to work together.
Unfortunately, South Korea has been continuing its response that damages the trust between our two countries, such as going against the 1965 Basic Treaty. Regardless of the circumstances, Japan has dealt with this issue so as not to influence Japan-US-South Korea cooperation over the current Northeast Asian security issues.
Abe added that Japan will continue to coordinate with the U.S. to secure peace and stability in the region. Earlier Friday, Japanese Defense Minister Takeshi Iwaya also called South Korea's move extremely regrettable, urging Seoul to reconsider its withdrawal from the three-year-old military information exchange framework and vowing to keep the decision from damaging regional security cooperation. Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono said on Friday that Seoul's decision misreads the security situation in Northeast Asia. Late Thursday night, he summoned South Korea's ambassador to Japan to lodge an official complaint.
South Korea had said Tokyo's removal of Seoul from the list of its preferred trading partners created a grave change to their cooperation on security, but Kono said those two are completely different matters. Seoul on Friday afternoon summoned Japanese Ambassador Yasumasa Nagamine to the South Korean Foreign Ministry and formally informed Tokyo of its decision to scrap the military pact. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
Seoul-Tokyo relations went sour dramatically following Japan's trade restrictions against South Korea last month. And with the termination of GSOMIA, their relations have plunged to a new low. And experts say it has now become even more difficult to mend ties. We turn to our Iji-won for more.
Last year, South Korea's Supreme Court ordered Japanese firms to compensate the Koreans forced to work for them during Japan's colonial rule. Japan refused to follow the order and imposed trade restrictions on Seoul, citing unspecified security reasons. And because of a loss of trust, Seoul on Thursday decided to terminate the military information sharing pact. Numerous experts say their dispute has now officially expanded from trade to security.
It seems Japan was hugely taken aback by Seoul's decision, and I think it showed South Korea's firm stance that it will face Japan squarely and firmly when it comes to historical issues. So if they continue to go after each other hard, I think the standoff could go on for a long time.
The consensus is that the dispute has become even harder to solve, and the experts differ on what will be the best way.
The South Korean government should separate the problems. On the forced labor ruling, Seoul should think more about what it can do, focusing on providing relief to the victims. On the trade restrictions, Seoul should suggest talks in which it not simply asks Japan to lift the curbs, but explains the impact on its economy. Then I think Japan will come to the table. And on the security issue, it's a regional matter, so efforts need to be made with Washington.
But with South Korea having continuously requested talks with Japan, some say Japan should be the one to make the next move.
The South Korean government offered to talk with Japan numerous times to find a solution that satisfies them both, but Japan has not been responding to those or any other gestures. It's simply been saying that it or its firms cannot pay a single penny. Logically and ethically, that is not right. The solution is for Tokyo to come to the table with sincerity.
Until that happens, Professor Yang says Seoul will have to take more countermeasures, including diplomatic outreach and a possible appeal at the WTO. The latest decision, he said, on the military intel pact was the least Seoul could do in that sense. Iji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea's finance chief held a press conference today gauging the impact of GSOMIA withdrawal on the Korean economy and laying out plans to mitigate the fallout. He also said next year's government budget will be increased by 9% from this year as part of ways to get the economy back in shape. Our Hong Yu has more.
Terminating the military intelligence sharing pact with Japan could make it harder to reduce economic uncertainty, as it will be difficult to predict when the Abe administration will impose export curbs on South Korea. To reduce the negative impact that the termination of GSOMIA could have on the economy, Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi pledged to actively respond by closely monitoring the situation. Hong will hold ministerial-level talks regarding Japan twice a week to come up with countermeasures to Japan's export curbs and to timely respond to potential market volatility. He asked the South Korean people and businesses to unite with confidence instead of feeling overburdened. The finance minister also used a press conference to talk about next year's government budget bill. He said the government will increase the 2020 budget bill by around 9% on year to some $422 billion.
Planning the 2020 government budget bill under an expansionary fiscal stance was unavoidable, considering recent global economic stagnation and domestic economic conditions for this year and next year.
Hong said a lot of things were considered when drawing up the bill, such as the active role of finance for an economic response, as well as long-term financial conditions and policy capabilities. With such a budget for 2020, the national debt level compared to GDP will increase to 39% from 37.2% this year. The Finance Ministry will submit the bill proposal to the National Assembly on September 3rd after it goes through a government ruling party consultation and is discussed by the cabinet next week. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
In other news, despite speculation that North Korea and the US might resume their denuclearization talks after the Seoul-Washington joint military drills, Pyongyang continues to step up its rhetoric. Today, the North's foreign minister criticized his US counterpart, saying that he's the one standing in the way of progress. Kim Min-ji reports.
North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho has personally lashed out at his U.S. counterpart, saying he's casting a dark shadow over the denuclearization talks. In a statement on Friday, Lee said it would be a miscalculation for Washington to try and deal with the regime using sanctions, saying North Korea will remain America's biggest threat. The foreign minister said that the North is ready for both dialogue and confrontation. Lee was referring to comments by U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in an interview in which he said Washington will keep its strongest ever sanctions on Pyongyang in place should the regime keep its nuclear weapons. He called Pompeo a diehard Thaksin that lacks rational judgment, blaming him for hampering the talks. Lee's statement comes after U.S. nuclear envoy Stephen Biegun said during his visit to Seoul that he was ready to resume denuclearization talks as soon as he hears from the North. But prospects appear dim as Pyongyang has been stepping up its rhetoric in protest against the Seoul-Washington joint military exercises and the adoption of new weapons. Experts see North Korea's criticisms as expressing displeasure and possibly signaling that it's not in a rush to start talking again, as the outcome at this point might not be favorable.
At this point, there's no need for North Korea to talk with the United States, which even doesn't seem very rosy from the perspective of North Korea. North Korea knows that even though it goes into the dialogue with the United States, North Korea, the United States would not change its attitude towards North Korea. What North Korea wants is to, the U.S. to change its posture to U.S. to lift the sanctions, even with dismantlement of Yongbyon facilities, which is not the case of the United States attitude and policy.
South Korea's Unification Ministry, which is in charge of inter-Korean affairs, called on North Korea and the U.S. to build mutual trust and respect each other, expressing hope for positive negotiations. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea is putting tighter safety checks on Japanese food imports starting today. The Food Ministry says it's doubling the number of inspections on food imports from Japan that have a record of being sent back due to radioactive contamination. The ministry also plans to double the amount of samples inspected. The new measures will be applied to 17 products, including tea and chocolate. Despite the tensions between Seoul and Tokyo, the number of visitors from Japan actually increased last month. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
More visitors from Japan came to South Korea in July despite souring ties between Seoul and Tokyo. Data from the Korea Tourism Organization shows that 1.5 million foreigners of all nationalities visited Korea last month, up 15% from a year earlier. Tourists from China were the largest group with 520,000, followed by Japan, Taiwan, and the U.S. Visitors from Japan increased 19% on year to 275,000, as people didn't seem too bothered by the politics between the two countries.
This is just politics issues. I think in this Japanese citizen and the Korean citizen, never mind the situation. This is between the Koreans, some of the government, the Japanese government, like and challenge in the games. So it doesn't matter. We are more enjoy to the sightseeing in the Koreas. We like.
I like visiting Korea. I also came here last July. Though there are various issues recently, people are very kind and they help me when I need help. I just enjoy the tour.
Another set of data by the Korea Culture and Tourism Institute found that young female visitors were the driving force behind the increase. It says 63% of Japanese tourists were female, and the largest age group were tourists in their 20s due to an increasing popularity of K-pop and K-beauty.
Many Japanese visitors to South Korea say though it is a difficult time for both countries, People should continue cultural exchanges and tours. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Japan's immigration office says the number of South Korean tourists coming to the country for short visits dropped significantly this summer. From August 9th to the 18th, just 12,000 South Koreans entered Japan through Narita Airport, which is a 35% decrease from the same period last year. The immigration office attributed the sudden drop to the downturn in the country's relations. South Koreans have been boycotting Japanese products and tourism since early last month. Earlier this month, an art festival in Japan removed a statue representing the so-called comfort women, sparking anger from participating artists. The festival's art director was in Seoul yesterday, where he apologized to those who made the piece, but said the statue was removed because of legitimate safety concerns. Lee Min-sun tells us more.
A statue representing many victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery, commonly known as comfort women, was removed earlier this month from Japan's largest art festival. At the time, the statue's sculptors only received an email from the organizers of the Aichi Triennale art festival explaining their decision 4 days after the exhibition came to an end. The statue's removal triggered an uproar with the segments of the Japanese public and artists from Japan and other countries insisting the organizers shouldn't have backed down to threats. Without prior notice, the festival's art director attended a discussion held in Seoul on Thursday and said he wanted to apologize to the artist.
So far, I haven't heard anything from the festival's organizing committee. What we heard today was the first message we received from them.
We showed discourtesy. We also felt there was a lack of communication. I want to talk to the artist and say sorry.
However, instead of apologizing sincerely, Tsuda doubled down on the festival's past excuse.
When we made the decision, my only thought was about keeping the artist and our staff safe. It was a tough decision.
But the curator who planned the exhibition after freedom of expression that included the Comfort Women statue refuted the director's argument and said the statue's removal exemplified the issue of censorship in Japanese society.
It doesn't match the facts, but I'm afraid it is not appropriate to disclose it here. The Comfort Women statue was the most attacked piece at the festival, followed by other works about a Japanese emperor. That's the real aspect of Japanese society.
Over 30,000 people have signed a petition, and public protests are continuing in Japan, calling for the exhibition to be reopened. The curator also emphasized that there should never be a repeat of the situation, saying the festival should reopen to show the right-wingers who made the threats that their behavior is unacceptable and won't be tolerated in the future. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Now, since the end of the 19th century, most industries have focused on mass production. However, with the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, Korea has been trying to grow new and different industries, including customized health products. Here's our Oh Soo-young with the third installment of our series on new industries.
One size doesn't fit all when it comes to beauty in all its shades and varying skin types. A venture company in southern Seoul is customizing skincare products based on individual DNA amid the government's push to expand the consumer genomics market as a crucial part of Korea's biohealth industry. Using results from direct-to-consumer DNA tests, Jeno-Hill draws up the optimal formula for each and every customer.
Customers seeking brand value or products that offer benefits for all are a thing of the past. We, on the other hand, offer a wide range of products developed for each individual customer. For instance, our skincare products contain elements that curb the genes that cause rapid aging, loss of skin elasticity, and skin discoloration.
The company has been selected for its innovative products, which include patented substances such as medicinal mushrooms, which keep the skin strong and healthy. It hopes to develop more customized skincare solutions once the government eases restrictions on sharing other genetic information on skin such as allergies.
They say you are what you eat. And this catering service in Seoul comes up with diet plans, recipes, and customized meal deliveries, all of which are best suited to your genetic makeup.
Based on a person's DNA results, a nutritionist recommends the daily calorie intake and the proportion of nutrients you should consume for optimal health, skincare, and hair. The mills also aim to make up for genetic traits that cause a lack of skin elasticity, slow metabolism, and male pattern baldness.
We live in a world where so many people as young as 30 years old are developing conditions such as cancer, high blood pressure, and diabetes. Based on your genetic makeup, you need to take care of your eating habits and environmental factors over the long run, as the impact will show up over time.
The global consumer genomics market is projected to top $4 billion by 2025, growing at 20% a year. However, to develop more useful solutions tailored to individual needs, industry leaders say the country's regulations on genetic information need to be loosened significantly. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
The South Korean government will raise monthly health care insurance payments by 3.2% next year, but some ultrasound tests will be covered by the insurance. Our Choi Si-young tells us more.
Next year, South Koreans will pay around $3 more a month for their national health insurance payments. Workers will pay about $95 a month, while the retirees and self-employed, known as regional subscribers, will pay about $74. Setting the rate on Thursday, the health ministry said the raise in insurance payments was a compromise between the government, which wanted a larger increase, and labor unions, which demanded a smaller increase. On the same day, the ministry also unveiled measures that will bring down the cost of some medical expenses. Starting September, health insurance will apply to ultrasounds of the prostate, bladder, and other male reproductive parts. The ministry says around 900,000 men will see a reduction in their expenses. It says those patients could pay around one-third of what they pay now with the new insurance coverage. Health insurance will also newly apply to some females undergoing medical examinations. Starting next year, females who gave birth prematurely or have underweight babies will pay less for their regular checkups. Those patients will only have to pay 5% of the entire cost, down from 10% now. The health ministry says it plans to raise healthcare payment rates by an average of around 3.5% every year until 2022. Choi Si-young, Arirang News.
South Korea is introducing a new system to help people make sure the eggs they buy are fresh. Starting today, eggs will be labeled with the date they were laid, the farm they came from, and in what conditions the chickens there are raised. Our Lee Seung-jae has the story.
Cartons of eggs are on sale at this major supermarket chain in Seoul. A 10-digit information code is printed on the eggshells. Plans for the new labeling system were first launched on February 23rd, and after a 6-month grace period, the system is now live. Large supermarkets have already started checking to make sure there are no problems with the labels.
Because the ink is water-soluble, it could smear during the summer. So we check the labels during the stocking process. If there are any smears, we replace the eggs.
So what does the 10-digit code indicate? The first 4 numbers indicate the date the egg was laid, followed by a 5-digit code which indicates who the producers are. The last number indicates the breeding environment for the chickens laying the eggs. The number 1 indicates chickens raised in a paddock. 2 indicates free-range chickens. 3 and 4 indicate chickens raised in upgraded coops and normal coops, respectively. But for most consumers, the first 4 numbers are the most important digits to look out for.
Eggs are food. You can't eat them after they expire, so the date they were laid on is the most important thing.
Eggs have a shelf life of 30 days if stored at room temperature and 40 to 45 days if stored in a fridge. From Friday, if supermarkets in South Korea sell unlabeled eggs, they can be subject to a 15-day business suspension and be forced to throw away all their unlabeled eggs. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has asked the police to show kindness to those who are in trouble while being strict towards those who harm others and violate the law. He was speaking at a graduation ceremony at the Central Police Academy in Chungcheongbuk-do Province earlier today. Moon told the 12,000 graduates and police officers present that he anticipates the police to write the next 100 years of history by creating a society of fairness and justice. A Seoul court has ordered Volkswagen Group and its Korean unit to compensate customers who bought their cars in 2015. The Seoul District Court said the firms should pay for what it called the customers' psychological damages caused by the car maker's emissions cheating scandal and delayed recalls. In late 2015, hundreds of Korean owners of Audi and VW vehicles filed a lawsuit against the car makers after the government found the German cars were fitted with devices that cheated emissions tests. The court ordered Volkswagen, Audi and their Korean unit to pay $825 in compensation to each car sold to each plaintiff. U.S. manufacturing has contracted for the first time in a decade on the back of dwindling orders, according to IHS Markit on Thursday. America's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, was 49.9 this month, falling below the neutral 50.0 threshold for the first time since September 2009. A reading below 50 indicates that the sector has seen negative growth. IHS Markit says the slowdown indicates a pessimistic outlook on demand, causing a reduction in inventories. Analysts also say the tit-for-tat tariffs between the US and China are also having an impact. The South Korean film Parasite has been submitted as a contender for the Best International Feature of next year's Academy Awards. The Korean Film Council on Thursday chose the black comedy over 7 other candidates. The council said the film and its director Bong Joon-ho are already globally renowned, adding the movie has enough artistic quality to represent Korea. Parasite was the first Korean film to win the Palme d'Or at this year's Cannes Film Festival. That has been your 3-minute news flash.
The weather was very pleasant today, and it's expected to continue into the weekend.
Good news indeed. For more details, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Now, today is Choseol in Korea, marking the end of summer heat and the beginning of cooler autumn days. And right on cue, the surrounding air has turned cooler. Now, the weekend weather is expected to be favorable for those going on a trip. However, keep in mind there are some chances of some sporadic showers in Jeju and the east of Gangwon province at times. And now going over to our readings for tomorrow, we'll mostly begin with cool temperatures lingering around the 20s. Now Seoul will wake up to 21 degrees Celsius, while Busan begins the morning at 22 degrees. Now with some clouds hovering over the nation, the afternoon high in Seoul is expected to peak up to 29 degrees, while Busan and Jeju Island will hit up to 28 degrees. The temperature difference between the day and night will increase from now on. Experts say a temperature difference close to 10 degrees reduces the immune system's function by 30%, increasing the risk of catching a cold. So if you are planning an outdoor outing this weekend, it would be a good idea to have some light clothing or even a cardigan ready to wear. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That will do it for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in Depth is next.